This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome. I'm Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. For the next 2 hours, we're going to be talking news, politics, history, food, and a lot more. So don't touch that dial. We're at 770 AM in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area where I grew up. But we're also live streaming worldwide at 173 nations. You can get that at WABCradio.com. Last weekend, I had syndicated radio legend Joe Pags on the show, and it's amazing how much email and how many text messages I got from people outside the greater New York area. So we're delighted that you can tune in with us. Late on Friday, Judge McAfee of Georgia ruled that the embattled Fulton County prosecutor Fani Willis will be allowed to remain on the case that she has brought against President Donald Trump, Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and a cast of other Trump advisors over the 2020 election. This despite the fact that she got caught red-handed, not only using $645,000 in COVID earmarked funds to pay her boyfriend, a personal injury attorney named Nathan Wade, to become the special prosecutor in a complicated RICO case, but lied repeatedly about their relationship. My good friend Brendan Dilley of the Dilley Mean Team made a song about this, and, well, we play it with their permission.
Now I say is she a boat rigger, but fatty only make my lead bigger. Now I say is she a boat rigger, but fatty only make my lead bigger. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. 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 Fanita thought always at the beauty salon with a baby Louis Vuitton under her underarm. She said, talk to Waka Flock, I could really do harm. For a case, I got a lot, I could blow up the spot like a bomb. But I'm looking for the one, have you seen her? She went and put my whole team under subpoena. Diva, Friday, Felicia, abort kids, in charge of Donald Trump and niggas for bullshit. Indict Gucci Mane and chase it for some pain. She think it's all a game, for rap with no shame. She get up on TV, they all know her name. If you're playing Fulton County, then you better get paid. You know why? Cause the DA corrupt, yo. From what I heard, Fatty got a baby by Mondo, and Loomis said she got a trap house in a condo. She don't care whatever said, long as she flopped though. Now I say is she a boat rigger, but Fatty only make my lead bigger. Now I say is she a boat rigger, but Fatty only make my lead bigger. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. 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 13 counts, she getting paid to pounce. And that for 13 counts, I know somebody paying top to charge whoever he says. Another DA in the pop to handle all of his biz. You will see her at the courthouse, call her Fani Willis. Charge another rapper cause you know she out to get us. She even charge her president if you could pay the money. election interference done deal for the money. She walk around looking like Chapo with the money. She got a new beat, got light pole with the money, money. If you ain't no punk, holla, we want T-Trump, we want T-Trump, yeah. It's something that you need to have, cause when we get revenge, we gonna kick some ass. 13 counts, got paid for every count straight into bank accounts. Now I ain't saying she a vote rigger, but Fatty only make my lead bigger. Now I ain't saying she a vote rigger, but Fatty only make my lead bigger. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down. Get down, girl, go ahead, get down.
Hysterical. Well, people come to the Roger Stone Show for political analysis, and here is mine. I actually think, once again, strangely, this is going to inure to Donald Trump's benefit. You see, people across the country saw the extraordinary testimony of Fani Willis and her lover boyfriend. And once again, they will see the innate unfairness of this proceeding. Now, candidly, I never thought that these charges were going to be dismissed. So if Fani Willis and her paramour, Nathan Wade, had both been disqualified today, that only meant that the case would be tried by a most likely far more competent, experienced prosecutor from the Georgia Attorney General's office. The case itself still is on the verge of collapse because there is, without any question, existing in another state case and another federal case, definitive evidence that would show that, well, Joe Biden really didn't carry Georgia. And those two cases are ongoing. So we'll follow this story, but it will develop further. This past week, with the Republican presidential primaries in Hawaii and Washington State, Donald J. Trump became the second man in U.S. history to be nominated 3 times by the Republican Party for the office of president. My good friend Jack Posobiec with Human Events pointed out that that's in both cases because of an allegedly stolen election. The only other man to achieve this was, of course, Richard Nixon, who narrowly lost the 1960 election, where there were widespread charges of fraud and voter theft, staged the greatest single comeback in American political history in 1968, and then, of course, was reelected in the greatest landslide in American political history in 1972. The only thing that comes close, of course, is a great New Yorker, a former governor, former Erie County Sheriff, Grover Cleveland. Cleveland was elected president, had a very successful term, was defeated for re-election in an election in which it once again was disputed, and his supporters insisted he was robbed in a stolen election, only to return yet to another term in the White House. So in other words, the only president in American history to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Also this week, the antics of the January 6th committee investigation began to unravel further. Now, you remember that kabuki theater made-for-television production in which Speaker Nancy Pelosi rejected the Republicans nominated to the committee by the Republican leadership, and instead sat Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, two House Republicans who were known never-Trumpers. So when you say this was a bipartisan investigation, that is, of course, a fraud. Well, it turns out that chief witness for the committee, Cassidy Hutchinson, who claimed that Donald Trump got into a physical altercation with his Secret Service detail after his speech on the ellipse demanding that they take him to the Capitol. She claimed that the president actually tried to grab the steering wheel of the presidential vehicle, which would be kind of hard to do from the back seat. It turns out that the Secret Service agents in question both testified that, well, that never happened. Somehow, however, that particular deposition never made its way into the January 6th committee report. And almost all of the records from the January 6th committee investigation were strangely destroyed when the House changed hands and Republicans came into a majority. Now, I've got a particular gripe here to pick because, among other things, Cassidy Hutchinson was suborned in perjury by Liz Cheney. Listen to this particular clip from the January 6th committee hearings.
The night before January 6th, President Trump instructed his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, to contact both Roger Stone and Michael Flynn regarding what would play out the next day. Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that President Trump asked Mark Meadows to speak with Roger Stone and General Flynn on January 5th?
That's correct. That is my understanding.
And Ms. Hutchinson, is it your understanding that Mr. Meadows called Mr. Stone on the 5th?
I'm under the impression that Mr. Meadows did complete both a call to Mr. Stone and General Flynn the evening of the 5th.
And do you know what they talked about that evening, Ms. Hutchinson?
I'm not sure.
That's called perjury, folks. Let me be very clear. I've never spoken to former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in my life. I've never emailed with him, never texted with him, never talked to him on the phone. I do think I met him once in the green room at Fox back when he was a congressman, but I'm not even sure about that. And I checked with my good friend General Michael Flynn, who's appeared here on the Roger Stone Show and will again. He's never talked to Mark Meadows either. Now, Cassidy Hutchinson went on to say that Mark Meadows, the president's chief of staff, wanted to attend a meeting run by Mayor Rudy Giuliani in a war room at the Willard Hotel to talk about the plans, presumably, to seek a delay in the certification of the Electoral College by the U.S. Senate, but that she, Hutchinson, dissuaded Meadows from going, but that Meadows later called Stone and Flynn for a debrief. The problem with that is, well, if there was a war room in the Willard Hotel, I didn't know about it. I did have a room in the Willard Hotel. That's where I slept on the night of the 5th. But I was never in any war room and unaware if there even was one. In fact, the Washington Post, of all people, had 3 separate sources that confirmed that I was uninvolved in the Electoral College effort and never in any war room. Yet, despite the fact that I was seen leaving my hotel, well, that was cited as conclusive evidence that I was in a war room in which I was never there. That's how the fake news media cabal works with the Democrats. It's outrageous. President Joe Biden's State of the Union address, which I believe was his attempt to show the Democrats that he is tough and vital and ready to take on Donald Trump, well, I think it backfired spectacularly. Biden seemed angry. Why he has to scream and shout, I really don't understand, but candidly, it's not very presidential. But he did kind of give us the heads up on the kind of campaign he's going to run. He insists that the economy is, I saw his campaign commercial, the strongest in American history. Really? The cost of groceries is up 21.2%. The cost of eating out at a restaurant is up 21%. The cost of baby food is up 29.6%. The cost of pet food is up 22.7%. The cost of rent is up 20%. The cost of electricity is up 28.4%. The cost of natural gas is up 30%. The cost of clothing is up 12%. The cost of used cars is up 20.3%. The cost of airfare is up 31.4%. The cost of public transportation is up 20.8%. Yet real average weekly wages are down 4.2%. Housing guru and recognized market and mortgage expert Barry Habib joins us today on the Roger Stone Show to talk about the Biden economy and why the numbers that are being pushed by the Biden administration, the numbers being touted in their TV. During the president's State of the Union address, he was essentially goaded into acknowledging the issue of illegal immigration. You see, the Democrats would like to pretend the issue doesn't exist at all. I actually was watching MSNBC, and they insist it's a figment of our imagination, that it's all made up by Fox News, that there is no illegal migrant crisis in the country. It was during the president's State of the Union address that Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene actually goaded the president into saying the name of Laken Riley. Laken Riley, of course, is the young nursing student brutally murdered by an illegal migrant in Georgia. Well, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene joins us today on the Roger Stone Show. The tone of the president's campaign, or I should say his State of the Union address, which was really a campaign address, tells you what kind of campaign he's going to run. By tradition, the president in the State of the Union never makes reference to their predecessor. It's not a political speech, but Joe Biden made reference, called out Donald Trump 13 separate times. Of course, he didn't say his name. He just referred to him as his predecessor. Actually, with the dropping of charges against Trump in Georgia and speculation based on the arguments on Friday in the Florida documents case that certainly made it sound as if Judge Eileen Cannon intends to dismiss those charges on the basis of an argument of selective prosecution. In other words, we now know, based on the special counsel's report, that Joe Biden retained top secret and classified documents. In his special counsel report, special counsel Robert Hur said it was willful, therefore a violation of the law. Well, things are not looking too good for the lawfare strategy of taking Donald Trump down by having some trial in which they can vilify him, suck up his time, siphon his campaign money before the election. You're tuned in to The Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC, and we'll be right back.
Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
First, they came for our guns, then they came for our gas ranges, then they were back for our gasoline-powered cars, but, well, now they're back for our pizza. You may remember that several months ago, the Adams administration in New York City announced their intention to completely outlaw coal-fired or wood-fired pizza ovens. This is a disaster because classic places like Lombardi's, John's of Bleecker Street, Lucali, Danino's, the L&B Spumoni Gardens, Tantano's, these are the greatest emporiums of pizza in the country. But now, New York City officials have quietly approved a controversial new green initiative. This plan requires pizza parlors and bakeries that use decades-old wood and coal-fire stoves to cut their smoky pollutants by 75%. Some pizza establishments have already complied with the upcoming mandates by spending over $600,000 to install new smoke-eating systems. Now, initially, Democrats shut down New York City over the pandemics, followed by the vaccination and masking mandates, but recently they warned real estate investors of legal action if their political stance differs. Now they're actually introducing what is in essence congestion pricing and targeting of the pizza industry. Over 100 classic New York pizza parlors have announced that they have to consider closing. Baby John DeLutro, who runs Baby John's Pizza in Little Italy, will be along shortly to talk to us about this war on pizza. I came across a story that I remembered, and I have to relate to you. This was actually told to me by the comedian John Biner, who heard it from an old black musician who had toured with the great Louis Armstrong. I actually confirmed this anecdote with Charles McWhorter, who once served as a traveling aide to then Vice President Richard Nixon. In the late 1950s, the State Department made Louis Armstrong an international goodwill ambassador, and they underwrote a series of concert tours for Satchmo through Europe and Asia. On the return from his first two tours, the jazz great and his entourage were waved through customs without having their bags and belongings searched, thanks to his ambassadorial status. But in 1958, after his third tour, Armstrong landed in New York's then called Idlewild Airport, except for this time he was directed to the usual customs line for a thorough search. customs agents had gotten a specific tip about contraband being smuggled into the country and were searching everyone entering the U.S., no exceptions. Armstrong joined the long line of travelers waiting their turn for customs agents to scrutinize their possessions. But the problem was that the world-famous trumpeter's possessions included 3 pounds of very fine marijuana that was packed in his suitcase. Apparently, some of the goodwill in his goodwill tour had been returned to him in kind. Well, Armstrong began sweating profusely, realizing that he was about to get busted for trafficking narcotics into the country while traveling on behalf of the U.S. government. Aside from the penalties of a black man in 1958 facing such an offense, the jazz legend Satchmo realized the national scandal that would be caused given his ambassadorial status, and official or not. Well, Louis Armstrong began praying. It was within that moment that the doors swung open and into the customs area swept none other than Vice President of the United States, Richard Nixon. He was surrounded by a small security detail and followed by a gaggle of reporters and photographers. Nixon spotted Satchmo and also had drawn a gaggle of people around him while he was waiting in line, and ever the shrewd politician, Nixon saw an opportunity to get a wire photo with the beloved entertainer. The vice president diverted his entourage over to the jazz man and asked, "Satchmo, what are you doing here?" "Well, Pops," you see, Louis Armstrong called everyone Pops, "I just came back from Asia on my goodwill tour, and they told me I had to stand in line for customs." After some chit-chat, long enough, of course, for the photographs to get snapped, Nixon, no stranger to physical labor, grabbed both of Satchmo's suitcases and said, "Ambassadors don't have to go through customs, and the Vice President of the United States will personally carry your bags to the curb. Do you have a car waiting?" So in other words, Richard Milhous Nixon, later to become the 37th President of the United States, muled 3 pounds of high-grade pot through customs without ever knowing a thing about it. Now, that is the kind of thing you can only hear here on the Roger Stone Show. Folks, I want to urge you, so you don't miss any of the great entertainment or talk that we have here at 77 WABC, please go to the App Store and download the 77 WABC radio app. That way you won't miss any of the great talk or entertainment that we have here at the most dynamic and I think powerful AM station in the United States. And I want to remind you again, you can listen to us at 770 on the AM dial, or you can listen to us at WABCradio.com, where we are broadcasting at 173 countries worldwide. I'm Roger Stone. This is The Roger Stone Show. Buckle your seatbelt because we'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back. I'm Roger Stone, and this is The Roger Stone Show. Now I am joined by Barry Habib, who is the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highway. He's an American entrepreneur, and the mainstream media, all of the media, goes to him for his expertise in both the housing and mortgage markets. He's the author of the #1 best-selling book, Money in the Streets. He's actually the man widely credited with saving the mortgage industry in 2020 from margin calls due to actions by the Federal Reserve. it was his presentation to the Fed that actually created stability at a critical time for America. This man knows more about the economy than anyone I've ever met, and it is my privilege to welcome Barry Habib onto the Roger Stone Show.
It is such a pleasure always to be with you, Roger. Love everything that you put out there. I'm one of your biggest fans.
Barry, I'm really glad you could make time for us on this beautiful Sunday. Joe Biden's State of the Union, he touted our current economy. In his TV commercials, he says it is the strongest economy in American history. They point to the unemployment rate. They point to the inflation rate. They point to the GDP as evidence of his claims. But based on our conversations, everything is not nearly the way he says it is. In the beginning of the show, I went through a long list of the increase in costs for everyday Americans, everything from the cost of natural gas, the cost of electricity, the cost of baby food, the cost of groceries, and those are all undeniably up. At the same time, real average weekly wages are down at 4.2%. And then you taught me this: if you look at the gross national income index, you will see that wages have been flat. So unpack this economy for us. Let's start with the unemployment rate.
So the unemployment rate, it's a very, very important measure. In fact, I hear people all the time, and I was just listening earlier, everybody's focused on inflation for the Fed to make its decision, and they're correct that it's extremely important because the Fed does watch inflation, and what they're watching is something called the personal consumption expenditures, and that's called PCE. They look at the core rate of that, which just simply strips out food and energy prices, because the Fed says, hey, we don't really have an influence on that. But what the Fed's saying is we want that to be convincingly moving towards 2%, with their target being 2%. We're a little bit above that right now. We're at 2.9%. And while it will trend lower, that last mile to get to 2, I've done the calculations. It's going to be hard for that. And as the market's starting to realize that it's hard to get to that number, we're seeing less anticipation of Fed rate cuts. The market was saying, hey, maybe we'll get 6. Now it's going to be 3, they're saying, which is in line with what the Fed told us in December. But on March 20th, we'll get a new number. But people forget that the Fed has this other mandate, which is called maximum employment. And that's why what you're bringing up here is so insightful, Roger, to point out that I think the best ticket to see the Fed cut rates will be the unemployment rate. It is currently at 3.9%, and it has moved up from 3.7 in the last report to 3.9. Now, here's the thing. We're 0.5% above the cycle low, which we saw in April of 3.4. The reason why this is so important is because it is an extraordinarily reliable recession indicator. Recessions, we know that we're in a recession officially like 8 months or 10 months or a year after the recession. Oh, yeah, well, the U.S. entered a recession back then. But this indicator will tell you when you're actually starting to see the beginning of the recession. Now, in order for it to be rock solid, we need to remain at an average of 3.9 for the next couple of months. I think we'll get there. But that will confirm that we are, yes, in a recession for sure. So when you talk about the Biden economy and unemployment, I agree with you. The two are very closely tied together. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office, which is very smart, they see the unemployment rate going to 4.4%, which would 100% say we are in a recession in 2024. So listen, things can change, but I am in alignment with this, and we could break it down further, and I'll explain to you why, because a lot of the numbers we're getting from the BLS on jobs, it's baloney. I don't really need to get negative on the BLS because they are understaffed and they are underfunded, but the numbers are just unreliable that we're getting from them.
So when Joe Biden and his administration constantly point to the stock market and consumer confidence as evidence that we have a robust and vibrant economy. How do you respond to that?
Well, there's an enormous high correlation between stock performance and consumer confidence. Enormous. So if the stock market's good, people see their 401k is doing good, people see they're more confident. It's a wealth effect. And also the housing market, which is the largest asset that more than 2/3 of Americans have, that has done extraordinarily well. So it gives people a little more confidence. My home's gaining in value. But it can be disconnected to the actual economy. Let's remember what is driving the stock market. It has not been a broad-based move higher. People said, it's the Magnificent Eight, then the Magnificent Seven. Now it's like 4 stocks essentially driving much of what you see going on in the stock market. The rest of the stock market has not really been participating in this. In fact, the Russell 2000 was in a bear market until just recently, meaning that it was down by over 20%. So the breadth of the market, the breadth of the advance is very limited, and it's being driven much by this AI craze that's been going on and the anticipation of it. These parabolic moves historically, like we've seen, typically come back down to earth. So I think that there's a masking in consumer confidence of what's going on. And getting back to the employment numbers, you see a big number come out, a jobs number come out. Oh, we 353,000 jobs. This is all imputed data. It's not real data that you're getting. It's all modeling. And the modeling, Roger, is baloney, because you can look at where you do get actual data, like from folks at ADP that measure 10 million payroll records, real hard data instead of using models. And their numbers tell a completely different story. Even when you take the BLS itself, when they survey people, when they do the actual survey, that's where you get the unemployment rate. Here's what we see for the last 3 months. We have seen a loss of 1.8 million jobs. 1.8 million jobs lost. And it even is worse than that, because those are full-time jobs that we've lost. We've replaced them with 900,000 part-time jobs. So, the quality of the work is deteriorating. The hours worked is going down significantly. So all of these factors say there are some deep cracks within the job market. And you started off with inflation, which is exactly where it's at, Roger, because people say, okay, the inflation rate's coming down. It's 2.9% of it. But this is a cumulative effect. It doesn't make the inflation of 20+% that people are feeling go away. This is 2.9% on top of the 20%. So the pain being inflicted is to a lesser extent, but it's pain on top of pain that isn't going away. Every time that people go to the grocery store, they feel it. And I think that's why voters are looking at the current set of circumstances and saying, this is not the direction I want to be in.
So talk to us about where you see this going. Famously, James Carville said regarding, I think it was the 1996 election, it's the economy, stupid. And I don't understand you don't have a crystal ball, but where do you think we are headed?
To me, I think the economy is already showing signs of cracking. We are definitely in a manufacturing recession. The numbers we got this morning from the New York Manufacturing Index were awful, way beneath expectations, but that's been the same with all the regions. Kansas City, Richmond, Dallas, Philly, all of these that come out reporting, they've all been quite negative. So in the manufacturing sector, yes, we're in a recession. When it comes to the services sector, we are seeing lots of layoffs. We're seeing that happen. We are definitely in a situation where the unemployment rate moving up will give us at least recession-like conditions. The stock market, very hard to determine which way it's going, but by historical standards, it is an expensive stock market. And by historical standards, it would lead you to believe that there will likely be a breather that the indices take. So I think that it will be inevitable, in my opinion, that the truth will come out about this economy, that it has been propped up by the Fed's balance sheet. It's been propped up by programs that have been put out there, which did create inflation, excess dollars that from government programs that have kind of staved off the natural state of things, which really would be a contraction, in my opinion. And Roger, the the overall economic conditions that we have right now, I think will start to turn slowly towards a more realistic level, which is lower than where we are here.
Now, this is an area of your particular expertise. Where do you see the housing and mortgage sectors going?
I think mortgage rates will come down a little bit, especially as we see a rise in the unemployment rate, and that will be a help to housing, which, housing you have to look at it in two different ways. Housing activity is clearly in a recession, and this is where a lot of people get it wrong, but housing values and prices, these have held up well, and they will continue to rise. I think that that home prices, home values will continue to move up. So from an investment standpoint, or if you own a home, you're going to continue to be in very good shape and feel good about that. Or if you get into the housing market, you should do well. Now, of course, caveat here is that every single zip code has its nuances and can be different. Some may under or overperform. But on a national level, we look at about 5% appreciation in 2024. When you think about 5%, you might not think it's exciting, but if you have a home and you put 10% down on that purchase, that 5% actually gives you 50% rate of return on your investment. So it can be very lucrative. In fact, some statistics here, homeowners have a 40% greater net worth than renters, 40x greater net worth than renters. And on average, according to Kiplinger's, 2/3 of all net worth of Americans is in equity in their homes. So it's a good long-term decision.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, we're talking to Barry Habib, the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highway, widely recognized in the country as one of the foremost experts on the economy, and particularly the mortgage and housing sectors. During his own mortgage sales career, Barry Habib personally originated over $2 billion in mortgages. But an interesting guy, he was also the lead producer and managing partner for Rock of Ages, the 27th longest-running show in Broadway history. He also produced magician Chris Angel's Mind Freak at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas. So he is hardly a one-dimensional individual. In fact, he's a bit of a Renaissance man. Barry, what kind of games can they play prior to the election to prop up the economy? We've already seen the Biden administration dip into the strategic petroleum reserves. There seems to be no end to their pushing the Fed to just print more money. What can we look for in that regard?
So it's a great question. So a couple of quick points to bring up, because I think it's important. You mentioned the consumer, and I was a bit remiss in that I should have brought up the fact that the buy now, pay later boom is something we should really keep our eye on. During 2023, almost 90 million Americans, remember, of the 340 million Americans, some are not even of age to spend. So 90 million Americans used buy now, pay later. The average ticket price was just barely above $200, which means if I can't make a $200 purchase and I have to put it on buy now, pay later, what does that say to the health of the consumer, which everybody's touting is so healthy and so strong? Here's the other thing, and Roger, this is perhaps the most troubling, that over 10% of consumers use buy now, pay later for groceries. And that in and of itself is something that is a very scary thing to think about. Is, if I can't buy the groceries as my basic food essentials and I have to put it on buy now, pay later, is the economy that strong, or is the consumer that resilient? I'm not so sure. What can the Biden administration do? Well, the Fed, let's hope that they don't have influence over the Fed. And I think that, if anything, the Fed may be to some degree apolitical. Jerome Powell is a Republican. However, he hasn't been the biggest Donald Trump fan. But by the same token, I don't think he has any allegiance whatsoever to Joe Biden, due to the fact that Joe Biden did not want to reappoint him. Joe Biden wanted to appoint Lael Brainerd, very, very, very liberal, very left-wing. But in the end, Jerome Powell won out. So he doesn't have any allegiance to either. So maybe he's going to be apolitical, but from his perspective, he's got to say, hey, look, it's 2 years. My term is over. The last thing I want is to go down as the worst Fed chair in history, which many people were saying about him because he did keep rates too low, too long, too much quantitative easing. It would be a bad legacy for him, which is why he's being so hard-nosed in trying to make sure that he gets inflation pretty close to that 2% target. There is something that I'm worried about, and very few people talk about it, and it is the way that the Fed is handling its balance sheet. So every month, about $90 to $95 billion from the balance sheet runs off. It was at $8.5 trillion. It's at $6.9 trillion now. Just huge sums of money. And that would normally really slow the economy down. But the economy has been kind of cushioned because of something that very few people know about. It's called reverse repos. And without getting too detailed, it would be as if I were a consumer and I went to a bank and I said, hey, you know what? I want to put some money in someplace safe in some CDs. But at the time, if I felt the Fed was going to be hiking rates, which was the case, a year or so ago, then maybe I don't want to put my money in a CD because I'd be missing out on future rate hikes. That means I could get a higher rate in the future if I waited. But rather than just wait for that higher rate, is there a place I could park my money? And the bank says, yes, it's a money market. Well, when you have huge banks making investments, it's analogous to this, but it's different instruments. Instead of a CD, it would be treasuries. And instead of a money market, they use this thing called a reverse repo. So there was an incredible amount of money that banks wisely put in this reverse repo because every time the Fed hiked, it went up. And they got up to almost $2.5 trillion. But once the Fed signaled that we were done with hikes, then these banks widely started to pull money out of these reverse repos and purchase treasuries at higher yield. They bought the 10-year treasury at 5%, the 2-year treasury at almost 6%. So they made wise decisions and locked in those higher rates above where they are now. The problem is that they've sucked out from the $2.5 trillion over $2 trillion of it. There's about $440 billion left. And here's what's going to happen. In the next couple of months, that $440 billion will run dry, in which case you may see a crisis develop. And that crisis could be evident perhaps in our banking system. And we've already seen some, remember the Silicon Valley Bank and the Signature Bank and the First Republic, we averted a crisis by saying, hey, here's $420 billion in a facility, which expired just a couple of weeks ago, but that staved that off. But there could be another big crisis brewing. I'm worried about this, and it is around the corner once we see this reverse repo dry up. The answer may be for the Fed to say, hey, we're going to slow down or taper the runoff of our balance sheet to add more liquidity. And if they do, that should wind up helping interest rates drop, and that should help the housing market.
Talk to us a little bit about wage growth. In other words, I pointed out that real average weekly wages were down 4.2%. We've got about 2 minutes, and then we'll be back with Barry Habib. Barry, what about wages?
It's very smart that you say real wages, because real wages, what that means is after inflation. So it's true that you could be making more money, but if inflation is eating all of it or more than what you're getting, then your real wages are down. Now, just recently, just in the past few months, we have turned the corner where real wages have turned positive, but it doesn't erase what has happened. We're seeing right now real wages in a positive state, but that's because inflation's down. If you're staying at your job, your income right now is rising at about 5% per year. If you're a job switcher, which means that someone's enticed you to move, that's closer to 7% per year. So switching jobs. But what's key here is that these numbers have come down precipitously. Those switchers were at 16%. The stayers were at double digits. So they've come down a lot. Now, inflation's come down rapidly, too. But what we are seeing is that wage growth is still there, but it is much more tepid. And we are seeing the quit rate. The last point before the break, for me, quit rate is down to levels we have not seen since 2005. And that means that the quit rate tells you, hey, I'll quit my job if I see greener pastures. It tells us that there's less opportunity to entice people to leave their current situation and move on.
Folks, This is the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to my favorite economic guru, Barry Habib, and we will be right back.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track. And ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
Welcome back, folks. This is the Roger Stone Show, and we're talking to Barry Habib, the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highway, recognized by many in the financial sector as the leading expert on both the mortgage and housing markets, but also a man whose views on the economy are always fascinating and incredibly on the money. Barry, is our current economy really not just a manifestation of the spending orgy that this administration has been on? Talk to us about the national debt and whether this is sustainable.
It's definitely not sustainable, Roger, and you are correct. It is a manifestation of a deficit-induced growth. It's the same thing for consumers as well. So even if you take it to the consumer level, credit card debt has ballooned by $270 trillion, and that is a very significant number because it represents over a 20% increase in the amount of credit card balances that people are carrying. Now, pile onto that the fact that the rates on those are, in the mid-20s, depending on the source you go to, somewhere between 22 and 26% average interest rate that people are paying on this. These are not your smartest places to have debt, but yet people are doing it. So I don't have an explanation, but I do know that the well tends to run dry. Let's all remember what credit is. Credit is a future purchase that would have happened in the future that you bring forward to today. It creates economic activity now, but the debt load of carrying it creates a burden on you that throughout history will cause you to buy less in the future because now you have the debt service, that burden that limits your ability to spend more money. It's the same thing with the government. I broke it down with the consumer just to give us something that we could relate to, but it's the same with the government. And the government, as you very aptly put, has been in a spending frenzy. Our debt has increased rather a scary manner. Because what we have seen is, our deficit just this 1 year is going to be $1.6 trillion in a year. Our overall debt is $34 trillion. These are way above anyone's estimate. And, when Joe Biden gets on there and says, not on my watch, that is just simply kicking the can down the road. That, at some point in time, we need leadership that's going to have an adult conversation and say, listen, Social Security, nobody wants to talk about this, Roger, but do people listening, do you know that there's a mandatory, this is in the rules, this is law, 23% cut in Social Security benefits in just 8 short years if we don't fix it somehow. That's scary. And this will be the leading campaign debate, I think, in the next election, not in this one, but as we get closer to it, as it becomes inevitable, unless it gets fixed, there are ways to fix these things. There's ways to fix the debt. I don't know that you can do it I know you can't do it by just saying, hey, we got to raise taxes. That won't do it because what people never think about is the deterioration of the economy based upon people now not spending, and then you get lower tax receipts, even though you have a higher tax rate. So, but by the same token, maybe there are things that should be considered that without doing too much damage can raise revenue. So I'm not saying that you can't have some sort of a compromise, but yes, the spending has to be looked at, and we have to get that under control. There is, this, hey, look, it's a short-term thing. I will just try and gain votes like we've seen from the Biden administration by free student loans that we'll pay for, or whatever it is that, and like the latest one from the Biden administration is insanity. It is, let's provide $400 assistance for first-time home buyers. This is the stupidest thing you could possibly think of on so many accounts, not only because, A, we don't have the money at our disposal to do it, B, it will not change anyone's decision whether they're going to be a home buyer or not for $400, and C, the most amazingly foolish thought process is it shows that there is zero concept of how the housing market works. The housing market, the problem with the housing market is not that we have too few buyers. It's that we have too little inventory. We have too many buyers with too little inventory, and that's what's driving prices higher. If you want to make it more affordable for people, what you should do is instead of over-regulating builders, instead of making it cost too much to build homes, you should have builders be subsidized to build homes for first-time home buyers. That's where the problem is. But what his proposal is showing total ignorance, because what he would do is exacerbate the problem. We already saw this playbook from Mr. Obama back in 2010, and it was a disaster. What he did is provide a tax credit for first-time home buyers. And what it did, it created a big spike in purchases at the time, but once it ran dry, it caused home prices to plummet. And those individuals, those poor people that he was supposed to be helping, what they saw happen is they said, oh, I got a tax credit, but then my property value depreciated much more than the tax credit I gained, and therefore those poor folks were then underwater and lost their homes. What Mr. Biden is looking to do is along that same line of thinking. I'll do something that gains votes, that sounds sexy, that people get behind, without any regard for whether it makes sense or whether it will help the economy or help those individuals in the long run.
All right, with about 2 minutes to go, I just got this text message. It says, Mr. Habib seems very smart. Please ask him what he thinks about investing in precious metals such as gold and silver in our current market.
Full disclosure. I am a big gold fan. I have personal investments in gold. So I want to tell you that first. Okay, so full disclosure. But I would tell anyone that if you have any doubt whatsoever in, in the amount of money that's out there being a little bit overdone, and then gold is a great place to be. Gold is something that, it's been said throughout history. An ounce of gold should buy one ounce of gold should buy a fine quality men's suit. That kind of relationship has been held together throughout history. And I think that gold prices will continue to go up. I am also a technician, meaning I look at technical analysis and charts. I think it is quite possible to see the price of gold continue to move up from here by at least another $100 or so from its current levels. It's $21.62. I see about $22.80 as the next resistance level. So I think that gold is a very good investment. It's been performing well. Of course, you have the digital gold version of Bitcoin, which has done extraordinary. And with the halving coming up, that's another option there. It's certainly not for the faint of heart, and it has moved up quite a bit. So you have to wonder, is that potentially ready for a pullback? But I do love gold as an investment.
All right, we have to leave it there. I want to thank Barry Habib, the Chief Executive Officer of MBS Highway, for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. Thank you for joining us, Barry.
Thank you.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC Radio, 770 on the AM dial. Don't touch that dial. Joining me now, one of my favorite firebrands, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, who represents the 14th Congressional District of Georgia. But I feel like she's my congressman. I feel like she's America's congresswoman because she is not afraid She's not part of that group that goes along to get along. She stands up for principle again and again, and I'm honored to have her here on the Roger Stone Show. Marjorie Taylor Greene, welcome to the show.
Hi, Roger. Thank you so much for having me on.
Now, Marjorie Taylor Greene comes from a family background, not a political background. She's worked in a family construction business, and she's also a fitness aficionado. She built and sold a thriving CrossFit gym in Georgia. I must say, Marjorie, I had occasion to run into the president this past Sunday. Somebody took a picture of us together, and at least 3 people told me that I'm getting fat. So I got to get back in the gym. But I admire the fact that you not only fulfill all your congressional duties, you work very hard for President Trump's reelection, yet you continue to stay in great shape. People don't know how hard that is, how much discipline that takes, but my hat is off to you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And that's not true. You are not getting fat, Roger. You look fantastic. And I really do believe in health and fitness. I think it's an extremely important part of maintaining a strong spirit and a strong mind, which is something that everyone needs, especially engaged in politics today. But yeah, I do. I come from a small business background. Our family construction company, and then starting up a CrossFit gym and successfully selling that not long before I ran for Congress. But it also helps me to have a perspective, a unique perspective in Congress of what it's like to just work as hard as humanly possible in order to be successful, and what the Biden policies and decisions they're making and how it's destroying Americans' ability to do that and to put a roof over their family's head, to feed their family, and to get ahead. And nowadays, most average Americans can't get ahead. We're falling behind due to inflation, due to, Joe Biden wants to raise taxes. That's his plan for America. So the future doesn't look bright anymore. It actually looks pretty bleak, and it's very sad.
Last night, I spoke to the Kings Point Republican Club here in Florida. It was a great, great event. But on the big screen, they played a bite from MSNBC. Now, I don't get my news from MSNBC for the same reason I don't drink out of the toilet. But speaker after speaker, talking head after talking head insisted that there is no illegal migrant crisis in America, that we're making the whole thing up, that it is a contrivance, a false narrative pushed by Fox News. Yet in your very own state, we had the horrific and tragic murder of Laken Riley, a murder at the hands of an illegal migrant that the media would really like to ignore, would like to gloss over and pretend it didn't happen. You called out Joe Biden on the floor of the Congress just prior to his State of the Union address. Let's listen to that. That's the sound quality's not that great, but what you heard was Marjorie Taylor Greene exhorting President Biden to say her name. That took an awful lot of courage, and of course, you had to do it again. Let's listen to this.
Not really. Lincoln Riley, an innocent young woman who was killed by an illegal. That's right. But how many of the thousands of people being killed by illegals? To her parents, I say, my heart goes out to you, having lost children myself. I understand.
There you heard it, folks. The courageous Marjorie Taylor Greene calling out the President of the United States, making him go off script, where he then, of course, completely bungled the name of the late Laken Riley. That took a lot of courage. It is not a tradition in America for members during the State of the Union to call out the president, but our system is becoming more like the British system, where at question time people call out from the opposition party some of the most direct and crudest questions of the opposition party leader. But I think it's understandable because Joe Biden turned a State of the Union address, which is supposed to be an uplifting, inspiring, uniting report to the country of the things that we're doing well and the areas where he calls on the other party to work together to do better. Instead, what I heard was an angry, bitter harangue, a campaign speech. Specifically, no president up until now has ever made reference to their predecessor in their speech. Yet Joe Biden tried to call out Donald Trump, not by name, but calling him my predecessor 13 times. And the tone of the speech was angry. Why does this man yell? I don't get it. Marjorie, what did you think?
Well, you just laid that out perfectly, Roger, and you're absolutely correct. The State of the Union is supposed to be a unifying speech in Congress on stage for all Americans to watch. And it's supposed to build hope and supposed to bring everyone together. And that's what Joe Biden should have been doing because he's losing in the polls and he's trying to run for re-election. Yet that was the most divisive speech. It was an attack. It felt like an attack on Republicans. And I think it felt like an attack on half of the country. But that's who the Democrat Party is. They've been that way ever since Hillary Clinton declared us all deplorables. They see us as second-class citizens, and they see illegal immigrants as our replacements, basically. But there's a lot to unpack in that audio that you played. When I called out, say her name, Laken Riley, did you hear the boos coming from the Democrats? They were booing me, booing and yelling at me for saying Laken Riley, say her name, forcing the president to recognize that an innocent American, and she's only the face of it. Laken Riley's not the only one. Laken Riley just happened to be the latest one. And there's already been more Americans killed from illegal alien crime and murder since Laken Riley. But the fact that the Democrat Party booed so loudly should be something that takes everyone to take pause. But to hear that MSNBC is blatantly lying about the crisis that we have a national security crisis. And Roger, I serve on the Homeland Security Committee. I know the statistics. The statistics that come in, we've talked to the witnesses. We've interviewed parents. We've interviewed ranchers. We've interviewed all kinds of American victims of this invasion that's happening every single day. We've had Secretary Emeritus before us. We've had the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, before us. None of them can deny the numbers. The facts do not lie. But MSNBC is lying. And this is one of the most dangerous things that we've had happening in our country, and this has been going on, and I would argue, for decades, and I'm sure you would agree, is that the news is not the news. It's a propaganda machine. And the propaganda machine is extremely dangerous. But MSNBC is lying. We are in a serious, very critical national security crisis. None of us are safe. We've had over 10 million people cross our border. There are over 2 million gotaways, and they're coming in every single day. The daily average ranges from 800 gotaways, sometimes as high as 2,000 gotaways every single day. These are people, we don't know who they are, where they are. We don't know where they came from. Border Patrol never caught them, but we know they crossed into the country. We don't know what they're going to do. We have videos and pictures of them carrying guns. and bags and backpacks, but no one caught them. This is not made up. It is not fictional. It is not President Trump's talking point. It is not made up by MAGA. It's very real. It's very realistic. It's the number one issue in the country, and it's also causing Democrat voters to switch parties.
Roughly just short of a month ago, my sister's only son, my nephew, at 32 years old, died of a fentanyl overdose. You can imagine the shock to my family, and therefore we have now been personally touched by this crisis. It's devastating. I know now, in a certain sense, how the family of Laken Riley feels, although the circumstances are different. You have the mayors of New York, Boston, Chicago, openly saying that because the law requires them to pay for social services for this it can only be called an invasion of migrants, that they have a fiscal crisis, that they're going to go broke, that they have to cut sanitation and law enforcement and education and other services for American citizens. So you have a crime spike in the country. You have a fentanyl crisis in the country. You have a fiscal crisis in the country at the county, state, and city level, yet the Democrats want to pretend that none of this exists, that we're just making it all up.
Well, first off, I'm very sorry for your family's loss of your nephew, and that's something that should never happen. 300 Americans die every single day, and they're poisoned by fentanyl. This crisis has come to our shores. It's come throughout our country because Chinese fentanyl is flown in and brought into Mexico, and the criminal Mexican cartels are pressing these pills and bringing them across our border and selling them across America. And it's actually, I consider it a complete attack on our country. Yesterday in Congress, they passed a TikTok ban, and no matter where anyone stands on that issue, I think the one thing to recognize is that Congress was willing to force the divestiture and the sale of TikTok from the CCP-owned company ByteDance. However, Congress and the Biden administration has not moved to force China to stop selling fentanyl to the Mexican cartel. And that's where I see the line so clearly to me, is that when Congress is willing to do something, they will do it. And we can solve all of these problems. We could steal and secure our border. We could tell Mexico that we're going to put the most extreme tariffs on your country and your trade to shut down the sale of pressed pills coming from the Mexican cartels into America. We could do it if we wanted to do it. But the most disturbing thing is that the federal government, the Biden administration, currently our Republican majority-controlled House, Democrat-controlled Senate, will not take action to stop the murder of 300 Americans every single day. And we could do it. And literally with the snap of a finger, Roger, we could do it. And I think that's a failure, and I'm really sorry for that. That's something that is unacceptable.
Yeah, it's really quite extraordinary. What do you make of the reports this past week that 348,000 illegals were flown into the country by the Biden administration and dropped at various airports? So they're not even coming over our porous southern and, by the way, also northern border, but they're actually flying them into the country. How do you justify this?
It can't be justified. It cannot be justified. My answers are impeachment. I've cried out and I've introduced articles of impeachment over and over again on Joe Biden. It was my articles of impeachment that we impeached Secretary Mayorkas. I believe in extreme accountability for our government. My solution would be not funding different departments of our government for this complete betrayal. And they are literally guilty of this invasion. The Biden administration is, when they're flying illegal aliens, flying them in, like you said, they're not even coming across the border, walking across or coming across in cars at ports of entry. They're flying them in. We have a very capable organization, TSA, that could be stopping these illegal immigrants if they are attempting to fly into our country. That's not happening. We have, every single port of entry that any other person flying in from foreign countries has to come through. So there's no excuse whatsoever. Again, Roger, I would reiterate that all of this could be changed literally with the snap of a finger, with a stroke of a pen, in one day. It all could completely change in one single day. But the Biden administration is unwilling to do it, which means they're completely guilty. They're complicit in this horrific crime against America.
It is truly extraordinary. With the resignation of Rhino Ken Buck of Colorado, nominally a Republican, the Republican majority in the House, I believe, drops to two seats. And as I am out and around, people ask me, well, why don't the House Republicans do this, or why don't they do that? Is it not the sad truth of the matter? Unfortunately, everybody in the House Republican caucus is not Marjorie Taylor Greene. We have those in our own party who don't seem to want to take action regarding the epic corruption of the Biden family. You, as you point out, were the first, I believe, to introduce articles of impeachment. There's more than enough evidence today to impeach Joe Biden, certainly far more than ever existed for the two impeachments of Donald Trump. Yet some within our own ranks they just seem weak-kneed to me.
So I don't think weak-kneed is far enough. I ran for Congress in 2020, Roger, because it wasn't Democrats that made me run for Congress. It was Republicans that made me run for Congress. I was one of the Americans, one of the Trump supporters that was so disgusted with our House Republican majority and Republican majority in the Senate under President Trump's first 2 years in his presidency. I was so disgusted that Republicans didn't do what they promised us that they would do, and they didn't pass the president's agenda at that time. And it was our one opportunity to get it done. And it was after that failure and after the midterms when Nancy Pelosi became Speaker in January of 2019, that I realized that we don't have a Republican Party that actually serves Republican voters and that cares about the things that we care about. They're just keeping the status quo, and it's more of a uniparty, which infuriated me. And that's why I ran for Congress in 2020. And I'll tell you that remains today, is there's not enough courage. There's not enough willingness among Republicans, most elected in Washington, to, in my mind, to even be taken serious. Because if we wanted to impeach Joe Biden, we have every ounce of evidence. We have more evidence than is even needed for the crimes that him and his family and Hunter have committed. And we have all the evidence needed to show that he is completely guilty of treason against the United States of America with his border policies, open border policies. We could even go further with his sale of the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, selling out Americans' emergency oil supply. Basically his attack on our energy critical infrastructure and with the Green New Deal and shutting down drilling in so many places. The list goes on, and it's truly, in my mind, treason, the policies that the Biden administration has brought against America. That's the key word, against. We have every reason, every cause, every bit of evidence. And we have a majority. If we would just vote together and take action against this administration, we could also hold them accountable in our budgets. But instead, Speaker Johnson has passed 3 Nancy Pelosi CRs extending their budget 3 times. Now a minibus was passed, which I voted against because it just was horrible. It was Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden's dream list handed on a platter by a House Republican majority. And so I don't think that America truly understands that we have all the power we need right now in our House Republican majority. We just don't have the will there to do it. And that's why primaries are so important across the country. And I don't think people understand how important they are. They can really make a change in who their Republican representative is in Congress in a red district, a really red district. And that's why it's important to engage in those. But it's also extremely important to hold whoever your elected Republican is accountable. And I'm telling you, when people make those phone calls and they send in their emails and they light them up on social media and they even show up in person and hold their own Republican representative accountable, I've seen it move mountains. I saw that happen with the Mayorkas impeachment when 8 Republicans voted with the Democrats to protect Mayorkas. I saw those people get absolutely lit up by Republican voters across the country, and they were moved, and they were sorry for that vote. And then we were able to move forward and actually eventually impeach Mayorkas. So Roger, I always try to tell the truth, and what I really believe is I believe the American people have the power to force the government to do their will, but they just haven't engaged enough to do so. And I hope they do. I support the people, and I really support people holding our government accountable.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show here on 77 WABC Radio, and we'll be right back with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of the 14th Congressional District of Georgia.
It's the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
We're back with Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene joining us here on the Roger Stone Show. Marjorie, first of all, congratulations on President Donald Trump's smashing victory in the Georgia primary. And he really made history this past week because with the results from the Hawaii and Washington state Republican presidential primaries, he cinched the 2024 Republican nomination, becoming one of only 3 men in the history of the country to be nominated for president 3 times by the Republican Party. You played a crucial role in that. How do you feel about the president's prospects moving forward? And specifically, I feel very, very good about these changes of leadership at the Republican National Committee, but I want to hear how you feel.
So here in Georgia, we have a situation that's not being talked about, and I'm starting to raise it because I'm really concerned. In 2020, in the presidential election, there was a third-party candidate, Jorgensen, and President Trump lost Georgia by less than 12,000 votes. But this independent candidate, Jorgensen, got approximately 62,000 votes. Now, without Jorgensen in the race, I think it's arguable that President Trump would have had more votes and would have won Georgia, even outside of the absentee ballot fraud that happened here in our state. Now, why that's important is we have a third-party candidate that's going to be on the ballot in 2024, and that is RFK. RFK is going to be on the ballot in Georgia. Now, I want to throw in a little statistics to add to this. In 2022, in our governor's race between Kemp and Stacey Abrams, there was also a third-party candidate, Shane Hazel. Shane Hazel, even though he had no money, no campaign whatsoever, was able to get 27,000 votes. And that these numbers are important because it shows there is an element in Georgia that will vote for a third-party candidate, no matter who they are and no matter how much their ability is to campaign. And the fact that they can't even win, we still have a small portion of voters that will do that. Now, how will that play out in the state of Georgia in 2024 on the presidential ticket, I think is really concerning to me. RFK, I'm not sure who all he pulls votes on, but he does pull some Republican voters, conservative voters, that the vaccine is a big issue to them because RFK is anti-COVID vaccine. And this is, I think this could be damaging to President Trump in Georgia. And the reason why I'm, kind of pulling the alarms and hopefully waking everyone up to this is we have to do a really good job in Georgia in educating voters that no matter how much you agree with RFK, maybe on the vaccine issue, if you vote for RFK, you are voting for Joe Biden, and you will be continuing this agenda and this regime's agenda that is destroying our country. And that's why we have to pull together and vote for President Trump. Another concern that I have is this past week with the primary election that happened here in Georgia is Nikki Haley pulled 77,000 votes. Now, some of that voting was done with early voting before she dropped out. However, it still extended, and it was enough for her to get 77,000 votes. Those were those Metro Atlanta Never Trumper voters that still linger, even though I can't comprehend why. So here on the ground in Georgia, I will be engaging as much as possible, Roger, on the ground, trying to let all of our Georgia voters know that if you sit it out or if you vote for RFK, you're voting for Joe Biden. And that is the only way we can look at it. That's the only way we can say it, because only a vote for President Trump in Georgia and across the country is going to make the changes we need and going to move forward to save our country.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene for joining us here this Sunday on The Roger Stone Show.
This is The Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back. This is The Roger Stone Show. One of my famous rules in my rules books, Stone's Rules, which has a generous introduction by my good friend Tucker, is that, pizza is like sex. Even when it's bad, it's still pretty good. When I was growing up in Norwalk, Connecticut, there was a restaurant called Phil Baker's. It was a full-service Italian restaurant named after a local prize fighter, and it had the greatest pizza I've ever had. I used to ride my bicycle there. I would save my nickels, dimes, pennies, quarters until I had enough to go buy a sausage pizza. The waiters would always ask me to see the money before they would fulfill my order. That's how young I was. Unfortunately, the state of Connecticut decided to put Route 7 through Phil Baker's, and, it is no more. My entire life has been spent trying to find some place that could duplicate that pizza. Then I read a terrific book, Pizza, A Slice of Heaven, by Ed Levine, and I found that the famous New York Times restaurant critic Phyllis Richmond also had a love for Phil Baker's. It is the pizza of my youth. Now, you may remember that several months ago, the Adams administration announced their intention to outlaw all coal and wood-fired pizza ovens in the interests of the environment. To me, this is nothing less than a war on pizza, an all-out assault on the greatest delicacy produced by New York City. And it really does endanger classic pizza emporiums like Lombardi's, John's of Bleecker Street, one of my real favorites, where they actually put the pie in the oven with the cheese and then take it out, add the sauce later, and put it back in the oven to finish it. One of my all-time favorites. Lucali's, Danino's, L&B Spumoni Gardens, Tantano's, and Baby John's Pizza of Little Italy. Now, New York City officials have quietly approved a new controversial green initiative. Their new plan would require pizza parlors that use these decades-old wood and coal-fired ovens to cut their smoky pollutants by 75%. Some pizza establishments have already complied with this upcoming mandate, some of them spending over $600,000 to install these smoke-eating systems. But the Washington Examiner has reported that over 100 New York pizza parlors are considering going out of business because of these new environmental mandates. Yes, first they came for our guns, then they came for our gas ranges, then they wanted our gas vehicles, but now they are coming for our pizza. Joining me now is a legendary New York restaurateur, Baby John DeLutro, who is not only the proprietor of Cafe Palermo in Little Italy, but also the man behind Baby John's Pizza, also in Little Italy. He is recovering from surgery, tells me he's doing great, and it is my privilege to have him on the Roger Stone Show. Baby John, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Roger. How are you, Roger?
I am doing great. So I'm not sure everybody understands what goes into a great pizza. There's the fuel source, there's the oven, there's the crust, there's the mozzarella, sometimes other cheeses, there's the sauce, which must include San Marzano tomatoes. This is the high quality of toppings, and then there's getting the exact harmonic and textural balance in your pizza. You've got to think about all of that when you're trying to produce a great pie. And now Eric Adams and New York City are coming after your business, telling you you've got to spend several $100,000 to install these smoke eaters to essentially choke the way you're making pizza. What do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I think he's crazy. He's got his other problems he should take care of and not worry about making pizza. We have more serious problems in the city of New York instead of making pizza. My pizza, first of all, I use the finest ingredients. I mean, we use East Coast grande cheese, we use computer flour, and all the ingredients that I use are very, very expensive, okay, which makes a good pizza. The top of the list that really makes a good pizza is the way it's cooked. Yes, a pizza definitely changes the taste when you cook it in the wood-burning stove. Okay? It gives it more flavor, gives it more texture, and it cooks the dough the right way. I mean, you just can't take the wood out of the stove and think you're going to cook a good pizza. It's not going to happen. Okay? He's worried about the environment. He's got to worry about the immigrants that come to this country that are sleeping all over the streets, full of germs and feces and urine all over the streets. The smell, the dirt. He's worried about the environment over a pizza. He's got to worry about the people that live in the city.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. You know, in 1984, I brought President Ronald Reagan down to Little Italy for a campaign stop. And ironically, he stopped right in front of your restaurant. It was incredible.
And I still have that picture when President Reagan was there. And I had a big sign, "Welcome, Mr. President." And he came in, and then he walked around the corner to Ferraris, because I was new in the business. But today, he wouldn't go to Ferraris. He would come to me.
So, you've been in the restaurant business a long time, and
51 years.
It has to be between the cost of your underlying supplies and the problems in the streets. It has to be tougher than ever. No.
Listen to me. Anybody who goes into the restaurant business in this day and age has to be in a mental institution. You cannot survive anymore. It's finished. The delivery, now they want to put congesting pricing. You know what's going to happen with congesting pricing? Mozzarella. If we're paying $3.10 a pound, it's going to go to $3.90 a pound because somebody's got to eat that up. The wholesalers are not going to eat that up. We're going to eat it up, and we got to give it to our customers. Our customers are going to pay for it. It's going to kill us.
Now, you also run a full-service Italian restaurant. I've been there one time. It was amazing. I had the linguine white clams, which ironically is on the one hand the simplest dish, but it's also the dish that's easiest to screw up. I've actually had people, this is really weird, add cream to that. That makes no sense to me. What's the story to a great clams linguine?
Clams linguine is simple. You just got to saute your garlic, season it, throw your clams in the pan, put a cover over them, let them steam, put a little clam broth, cook your pasta, and mix them together. It's a no-brainer.
Baby
never
John.
Never put a cream. I would never. My mother would turn her grave if I put a heavy cream and the clam sauce.
Yeah, my mother too. I've just gotten a text here who said, "We love Baby John. These guys must be friends of yours. Please tell people your Sunday gravy recipe once again. I have a pen and pencil ready." All right, here we go. This is my mother's recipe. That means it was my grandmother's recipe. People say, wait a minute, your name is Stone. What could you know about Italian food? Well, Stone is a name plucked out of the air by a clerk in Ellis Island, and my uncle's last name was the same as my grandfather's original last name, and that's Corbo, C-O-R-B-O, which is in itself a bastardization of the name of the town that they come from in Sicily, which is Corvo. But here's the recipe, and it's pretty simple. First of all, you chop some garlic fairly fine. You dice some onions. You get some high-quality olive oil, but the kind that is specifically labeled for frying or sautéing. You can get it at D'Agostino's, you can get it at Christides, but you want the right kind of high-quality olive oil. Now, you sauté the onions in the olive oil until they are translucent. Then you add the garlic. Now, this is absolutely key. Garlic has a much lower burning point than onions, and above all, you do not want to burn the garlic or the onions, for that matter. In fact, if you do burn it, you got to throw it out and start all over again. All right. So now you have sautéed a little of your garlic. You add your mix of meats. Now, I like to go 1/3 beef, 1/3 pork. Sometimes I will actually buy the uncased pork sausage meat, which has already got fennel and pepper, little salt in there. Other times I'll just go with ground pork. And then, if I can afford it, because sometimes you got to take out a small mortgage, 1/3 ground veal. Now, you brown all of that up, and then you add 2 or 3 cans of San Marzano tomatoes. Now, we talked about this last week, and this is absolutely key. There's actually a lawsuit right now. The New York Times reported on it because there was a tomato importing company, and they were trying to pass off plum tomatoes that were not San Marzanos. Right. So you got to look very carefully at the label. If it says San Marzano style tomatoes, that's a fugazi. That's not the real thing. So you want to be absolutely sure you have real, genuine, authentic San Marzano tomatoes. Now, I want to be clear. San Marzano is not a brand. San Marzano is a specific style of tomato that is grown in a specific region of Italy. Sometimes marked DOP. So there are many reputable importers and brands who sell real, authentic San Marzano tomatoes. You dump the tomatoes with the juice in with the meat. You then add 1 can of tomato paste and an equal amount of water. What my mother would do is she would dump the tomato paste. She would then take the can, fill it with water, throw it in. That was her dirty little secret. That was the secret that came from my grandmother. Now you add your oregano, a disproportionate amount of oregano, your marjoram, your basil, your salt and pepper, and you put it on a very, very low heat. And you let it cook, 3-4 hours. Sometimes I take a trivet and I put it, directly under the pot. Because once you burn it, it's done. It's finished. You gotta throw it out. And there you have my Sunday gravy. We get a lot of requests for this. Margot Catsimatidis wants me to do a 77 WABC radio cookbook, which I'm actually starting to pull together. It's not a bad idea. So, Baby John, you are known.
Roger.
Go.
One thing I would do different.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you say San Marzano. It's an excellent tomato sauce. I like Aldo Cucina. They make a great tomato sauce. I think it's the number one sauce out there today, Aldo Cucina. I believe every restaurant in the world uses it. Okay? San Marzano, they usually use it for your house. The only difference I would do with my meats is I would definitely put a spare ribs in there. When you fry a spare rib, the fat from the spare rib, the grease goes in that pan. And when you put your sauce in there, you'll get a whole different flavor. It's unbelievable. And I don't put paste. A lot of old-timers do put paste, but I think the American Italians of today, they don't use a lot of paste. And you're absolutely right. You let it cook for hours. And the secret where you don't burn it is that under your pot, when you're cooking, you got to put the cover, the tin covers of the tomato can. When you put the tomato can open, you use the round metals, you put them on top of the fire, the flame, and you put your pot on top of the metal. So the flame doesn't directly hit your pot. You understand?
Excellent advice there. You heard it from the horse's mouth. It's really hard for me to cook with electric. I really prefer to cook with gas.
It's a whole different taste. It's a whole different taste.
But they're trying to do away with the gas stoves entirely. If they do away with our coal and wood-fired pizza ovens, isn't it logical that the gas stoves are next to go?
I think it'd be easier if we get rid of the administration instead of our wood.
Very, very good point. All right, now.
I think we get rid of our administration. They're the ones that's causing all these problems.
I certainly cannot disagree with that. Baby John, let me just give you a hypothetical question. You're going to go out for dinner in New York City. You want great Italian. You're not going to go to your own place, Cafe Palermo. And there's no payola involved here. I just want to get good advice. So folks are out for a night on the town. They want great Italian. Tell me a couple places you would go.
Well, there isn't a restaurant that makes everything from A to Z. Every restaurant has their own specialties. I own the cannoli place. I own the bakery. I'm not saying my eclairs are the best or my Napoleons are the best, but I can honestly say I got the best cannolis on planet Earth.
Folks, if you're just tuning in, this is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC Radio. We're talking to Baby John DeLutro, who runs Baby John's Pizza in Cafe Palermo in Little Italy. And when we come back, I'm going to ask him about pasta, because not all pastas are the same. We'll be right back.
This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is Roger Stone, and this is the Roger Stone Show here at 77 WABC. If you haven't taken the time to do, please go to the App Store and download the 77 WABC radio app so you don't miss any of the incredible entertainment and talk we have here at the crown jewel of AM radio, WABC. If you're just tuning in, we have been talking to Baby John DeLutro. He's a legend in the restaurant business. He owns Cafe Palermo, but also Baby John's Pizza. We've been talking about New York City bureaucrats and the Adams administration assault on pizza. But we've also been talking about great Italian food, and gave me the opportunity to lay out my mother's Sunday gravy recipe, which we get a lot of requests for. And I wanted to come back and ask Baby John, not all pastas are the same. I mean, I obviously like on my pasta al dente, which, of course, al dente is related to the word dentist. If you think about it, it means, with a little bite. But I have found that some of the most popular brands in the country, in fact, some of the most popular brands in Europe, well, they're really not that great. So, Baby John, talk to me about great pasta. What pasta do you use? What pasta do you recommend?
Growing up as a youngster, there used to be a commercial. Anthony, it's spaghetti day. You remember that commercial? Every Sunday was spaghetti day. And there was rigatoni. Ronzoni pasta. That was the number one pasta. Today, the Chico is the best pasta you could buy.
Amen, brother. Amen, brother.
The best. Now, if you want to eat fresh pasta, you make the fresh pasta. The only thing with fresh pasta, it cooks faster, and it's a little more starchier than a regular pasta in the box, But today, they're coming out with all different types of pasta. They're coming out with organic pasta. They're coming out with gluten-free pasta. So you go crazy. You don't know which pasta to pick. But in my books, the Chico's the best, and I'll never stop using the Chico. I use it in my restaurants. I use it in my home.
Yeah, it's also my favorite, but people don't quite understand that the size, the gauge of the pasta kind of needs to be mixed with the thickness or the texture of the sauce. So, for example, I would not take a Sunday gravy and serve it with capellini. I take Sunday gravy, I'd serve it with a rigatone. I'd serve it with pacheri. I'd serve it with linguine. But I would never, take a heavy sauce and put it on a light pasta. Do you have rules like that?
Yes, Sunday sauce is the best of rigatonis. Rigatonis make the sauce. That's the only pasta you can make on a Sunday sauce is the rigatonis. They get delicious. You got my mouth watering over here. I'm ready to get up and cook over here for my wife now.
Well, it's Sunday. I've got my pot of sauce already on the stove. It's about 2 hours in. That's really inspiring me. You made reference to making fresh pasta. I've never done that. Tell us how that process works.
Oh, fresh pasta is flour and water. It's easy. It's like when you make a pizza pie. You make a flour and you make up your pasta. Now you get the machines. You flatten your dough out. And they have these machines today They have different designs where you can make fusilli, you can make rigatoni, you can make penny pasta, and it's all fresh. Okay? When I say fresh pasta, when I make my pasta, I like to use it the same day because it's nice and fresh. But you could use it a week later, a couple of days later. It doesn't change. Okay? It cooks faster. To me, I like it better. I like the texture of the pasta better. And the only problem is it's a little more starchy, so you got to watch how you cook it.
It's unfortunate that we are out of time. I want to thank my good friend Baby John Dilutro for joining us today. I urge you to go by his pizza joint, Baby John's Pizza, for an outstanding slice. He has chosen to fight it out in New York because, he loves the city. He loves what he does. We wish you the very best, Baby John.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
I know you've had some surgery, but I hear you're bouncing back. So God bless you, my friend, and thank you for joining us on the Roger Stone Show.
God bless you, and hope to see you soon. Thank you, Mr. Stone. Thank you.
All right, folks, I hope that interview made you hungry. It certainly made me hungry. I want to thank you for joining us here at the Roger Stone Show. Remember, you can always hear us at WABCRadio.com, where we're actually heard in 173 nations around the world. So if you are not in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area, where you can always find us at 770 on the AM dial, no matter where you are, you can always find 77 WABC. Don't go away, because my good friend Joe Piscopo is going to be right along with Sundays with Sinatra.